Hello, my name is Alex. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are expanding upon some topics that I've been talking about this week. One of those topics is about the gateway tapes and how the gateway tapes channeled consciousness like a laser beam. We're also expanding upon the secret government programs that all stemmed from one very important crash in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. We are also exploring the GATE program and how this ties into gifted children and consciousness itself. And that topic that we're going to talk about today, guys, is implants. Something I have covered on my channel in previous videos, but not this deep because I'm still learning and growing every day, and I've come across some crazy information this past week that is going to make for an interesting video. So stick with me and come down the rabbit hole. Make sure you grab your tinfoil hat because this one's going to be a wild ride. So let's get started by talking about patents. Have you ever, for fun, just looked at what kind of patents are out there on the US patent website, which I believe there are a few? Well, if you haven't, let me tell you what you might find there. For example, you might find US patent 3951134 in 1976 by a man named Robert G. Malik, who was part of the Dorn and Margolin Company. And that patent is for a remote monitoring and alteration of brain waves. Now, the interesting thing about this one is that this is tied to the Department of Defense, as there was a GAO dispute, which is, oh God, I'm going to forget it, Government Accountability Office, I think, dispute, which is when there's a department that oversees government projects and military projects and make sure that everything's operating in integrity, I suppose. Anyways, this one was with the military over antennas, which is interesting because this next patent, US patent 4877027, patented in 1989 for a V2K style auditory implant, which transmits sound in someone's head using microwave frequencies, which often require antennas. Now let's look at US patent 7102508B2, patented in 2006, which is for surgically implanted RFID style trackers with remote activation and cellular GPS uplink. Now, I was not planning on sharing this in this video, but as I was reading this, I got a memory of a meditation session I did during the year 2020 when I was trying to decide whether I was going to get that thing that everybody was getting. And when I meditate, I've been meditating for quite some time. And I like to consider myself a pro meditator because I can get in advanced states of meditation where my brain will go blank and I won't think of anything. And then that's how I can, well, how I feel like I can trust my intuition because it will be silent, 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 and then I'll hear something. And what I heard in that particular meditation, that particular meditation session, I can't remember if I heard microchip or it was RFID, but it led me down. It was, what was it? I think it was a microchip. Okay, so I was thinking a microchip for dogs, and then I saw that microchip technology used RFID technology, and I'm not saying that the you-know-what that they did to us in 2020 has that technology. I'm just sharing a meditation experience that I had that was before I started other people talking about that or the implant that they were trying to do with that. This was long before. But let's just play a wild conspiracy game for a second And let's just say that my meditation was really more like a remote viewing session, and maybe my inner guidance was seeing something that was really happening, which isn't far-fetched because there's a US patent for this style. In other words, saying that an implant can transmit sound in someone's head using microwave. Oh, sorry, not that one. A surgically implanted RFID style trackers with remote activation and cellular GPS uplink. Why did they want us to stand 6 feet apart? Is that because the human auric field is 12 feet? So 6 feet all around, 12 feet in diameter. Now, granted, the you-know-what was not implanted, but it was injected. So does that make a difference? Would this technology, in theory, remember we're still playing along, in theory, I'm not saying this is not factual information, I'm just asking questions. So I'm just wondering if that technology could still potentially work if it was injected. Could it work? I mean, we use RFID technology on our animals, so why not? And that's just an interesting rabbit hole to go down because it's saying it has remote activation. And remember how people got so triggered that year and so polarized, and there were some people who they kind of turned into like something that wasn't human, like they lost all humanity for the people who were untouched by this certain thing that happened that year. They didn't want you to be around them, family and friends that you'd known for years. Like they treated you like absolute trash if you were to mention that you had not had that thing, and a lot of families fought or broke up over it. Remember all that? It's just interesting to think about, right? Okay, so now let's get into, those are just a few, but just for fun, go down the rabbit hole, see what else you can find on there, because I found some interesting things. I found some things about hunting devices where the animals that are harvested, the interesting use of word, to harvest something for a hunt. And for some reason I thought about that one movie where the people are being hunted by the elite on a remote piece of land, but that's probably not happening, right? Probably not, even though Hollywood has to tell us what they're doing, but it's probably not happening because that's way too far-fetched, right? Right. Okay, MK Ultra, 1953 to 1973. Guess what else happened in 1953? Project Aquarius began, which was part of Project Looking Glass, which was a secret black books, government, military program by whistleblower Dan Burish whistle-blew the whole thing in the 2000s, and they captured 3 grays who were 45,000 and 53,000 years into the future or something. They were the offset of the human race after we nuke ourselves and we evolved from that. So we turn out looking like that guy. And the whole reason that they came back in time to implant the alien technology was so we could create Project Looking Glass and see the outlines, but we needed psychic kids to drive this technology because it operates based on consciousness. And then we saw that one of the timelines was for an apocalyptic type event, and then the Greys were like, well, that has to happen because if it doesn't happen, our species won't exist. So that's why they're controlling the higher ups and the elite and the Illuminati, and that's why Hollywood is creating all these movies about apocalyptic scenarios. So it's implanting it in our consciousness and it's normalizing the idea that there's going to be some kind of apocalypse. I told you guys, the rabbit hole gets deep. Okay, anyways, while all that was going on, that's when MK Ultra started. And what was MK Ultra? They were doing experiments on human consciousness, which they needed to power these machines, right? Okay. So they use DRUGS, hypnosis, electroshock, often against people's will. There's a lot of unethical stuff that was happening during MK Ultra, putting acid in people's drinks, probably spying on people without knowing that they're part of the experiment. And then that program stopped, but a lot of people think that it continued on with Project Stargate, which was looking at remote viewing, which they think that the Gate was an offset of Project Stargate, because the Gate program, Gifted and Talented Education, was playing the Gateway tapes, which was something that was created for the government during the Cold War, during Project Stargate, to study consciousness outside the bounds of time and space. And the Gateway tapes project consciousness like a laser beam. And what's interesting is that research for the Gateway tapes did not begin until after the New Mexico crash in Roswell in 1947. Are you seeing where all this is leading? All right. Then there's something called Project Artichoke. I forgot to look up the dates, but this is the involuntary creation of amnesia, hypnosis, and control over people using trauma and chemicals. Okay, interesting. So what else I find interesting, since we're playing the conspiracy game and again, just talking for fun and entertainment, okay? A lot of this technology is created, in the years following the crash and alien disclosure that wasn't officially disclosed, but years later has been disclosed that all this stuff was happening and has been happening on private military bases underground. CERN has a 17-mile tunnel system in Geneva where they're doing the CERN experiments, and they're basically recreating the Big Bang and experimenting they're literally making tears in our space-time continuum or whatever. And then Montauk Project, okay? And I think that was, I want to say the 1980s, okay? Because Stranger Things models that, and it took place during the 80s. So I think Montauk was in the 80s, but why am I thinking the 50s? I don't know. Anyways, this stuff is all kind of connected in the same time. What's also interesting about gate kids, so this is about looking, while all this technology is being created, there's no record that it's been used. It's simply been created. But what do we know? We know that MK Ultra was doing some pretty unlawful things. So we also know about the DARE program, which I mentioned in another video the other day, how it was designed to keep kids off drugs. Yet there's massive amounts of evidence that it didn't work and it actually had the opposite effect. Oh, how convenient, because that's really convenient for those who are in MK Ultra and they're trying to control mass consciousness. So isn't it convenient that they convinced an entire generation to experiment with what, so they could alter our consciousness. And anyways, as I was saying, as all this stuff is going on in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, guess what else is happening? Babies are being born. And every year that a baby is born, there's more vaccines that come out that these babies have to take. And then there's more heavy metals in these vaccines that contain aluminum and formaldehyde and all these other things that I don't know too much about, but I know that they have these things. And then there's, conspiracists out there that think that the VAXs have caused Asperger's and mental stuff, okay? But again, just a theory that people have. Could it be from the metals? Could it be that the metals had some kind of RFID style trackers? I don't know. Do we know if the RFID styles can be tracked when it's implanted in a shot versus an actual implant? But let's not forget about all of these Gates children who, testimony after testimony on all my videos, and people in my private Gate group have found implants, or what appears to be an implant. Or how about those that were taken away from our mother at birth or closely after birth, who had private surgeries performed on them, like an eye surgery, for example, on their retina, which is a really important body part or whatever, because your retina is how all this technology is used, especially, and you need your retina because that's where they can do that pulsating technology, and that really gets in your brain, and then they can do all kinds of stuff, sketchy military stuff like dispersing crowds through using microwave frequencies that temporarily incapacitate people because of the frequencies. Okay, so we mentioned how a lot of these people feel like they've either found an implant or they've been separated at birth. So is it possible that those surgeries could have been to implant something, perhaps some kind of experiment in consciousness, since this timeline split and this apocalyptic event has to happen, because now we're being controlled by aliens since the 40s, because that race of aliens will not exist. Future humans will not exist if this apocalypse timeline doesn't happen. So why do you think all the elite are building cities and massive tunnels underground? And why do you think there's shows like Under the Dome and that show called Paradise that just came out like in the last year, where the government was building a secret society in the mountains and they were only inviting the elite, and it was under a dome? Flat earth theory, Has a dome already been created? Have we been living under it now? Is that like a new thing? Like, were we always living under a dome? Or did that idea just come out because it's a new idea and it's somehow connected to this idea of what the elite are going to have to do in the future to protect themselves so they can continue to survive while the rest of us just disappear like the little peons that we are? Unless, of course, we make it to the Ascension timeline, which may have accidentally happened against their will because they decided to use children to channel their consciousness with their beautiful pure hearts, which are very high vibrational frequency. And maybe they didn't know that this wave of children could have been extraterrestrial origin, could have been from specific bloodlines, or we could have been abducted from aliens. Because why else would gate kids have all these memories about ET abductions when they were children, or dreams, or flying, or traveling to other dimensions, or precognitive dreams? Do you think that the government or military, or like maybe this technology just got into the wrong hands? Maybe it's not the government. Maybe it's like black ops. Like, do you think, I'm genuinely asking, do you think it's far-fetched to think that these people, like somebody out there, could be implanting these premonitions in our head to make us think that an end of the world apocalyptic event is going to happen? Or do you think that's synthetic, which again, there's tons of patents on synthetic technology like that? Or do you think that we could be of extraterrestrial origin ourselves? Maybe our soul essence, something about our consciousness. We're born into specific bloodlines who had the potential to have that kind of consciousness, but because we're living at a time where human consciousness is elevating, because we are in the 9th wave of human consciousness according to the Mayan calendars, which is the consciousness of unity consciousness, which has been activated since 2012, which is when the Project Looking Glass stopped working, and the timelines, they couldn't get it to work, so they shut it down. And then CERN started doing all these experiments, and CERN is trying to connect to, in theory, this Saturn Stargate. Saturn. Satan worship. Look what Hollywood is promoting. They want you to be drinking your whiskey and going to your rave parties, and they've got Kesha on stage with the Illuminati pyramid behind her, but that's just artistic expression, guys. That's not rooted in any kind of organization that's using her like an industry puppet. No, leave Kesha alone. Leave Kesha alone, and while we're at it, let's leave Taylor Swift alone and Katy Perry, because all this is nonsense. Nonsense, I tell you. Now let's talk about other real accounts of people who famously have had implants, like Whitley Strieber, who made the movie Communion. I believe that was in the 80s, and he's showed us on many podcasts he still has the ear implant. How are you gonna explain that, government? Do you think he put it there himself so he could be famous? I don't know. He said it doesn't bother him. I've seen some of his interviews. Seems like a cool guy. And then we've got people like Dr. Roger Leir, who is a surgeon that has apparently, supposedly, removed alleged implants starting in the 90s, where there was a woman or some women who on x-ray found that they had implants. So he did an implant removal surgery and found that it had aluminum and other metals that resembled what they found in meteorites, and they were emitting some kind of frequency. But then other people tried to debunk it and say, well, that was maybe a shards of glass that got lodged in the person's arm randomly somehow. I don't know, maybe they're in an accident or something. I'm not really sure how random glass and metal gets implanted in your arm, but sure, okay. Anyways, in 2014, a couple years after the Project Looking Glass stops working, and now consciousness is more like, oh, can't necessarily be controlled, so maybe we got to start up in our experimentation, guys, because now the people controlling Project Looking Glass are having a hard time controlling consciousness, and if we don't control it to get to this apocalypse timeline, then we're screwed and future humans won't exist. Okay, so Roger Leir in 2014 released an article called The Smoking Gun in UnX magazine, issue 10, March 2nd, 2014. Died of a heart attack 12 days later. Yikes. That's unfortunate. Granted, he was 79. Not unusual for a man of his age to have a heart attack, and not completely unusual to share your life's work with the world, a compilation of all your work over the decades, and then just die a couple weeks later. Some people might argue, though, that releasing an article of just monumental importance might have been an exciting time in one's life. Maybe they realized like they don't give a F anymore and they've got more things to release after that. I don't know. But what's interesting about that is that we've seen a lot of famous people disappear from unaliving themselves with, like going to losing out in the sobriety battle, okay, or unaliving themselves, or come dying in a hot tub of because they relapsed and had a heart attack or something like that. And then we've got like Brittany Murphy and her husband, and then P. Diddy's ex-wife or girlfriend, whatever that was, all dying. I can't say that word. Unaliving from pneumonia, I think, which caused the heart attack. Is that true? I don't know. Guys. Just speculation here. All right, so those are all the facts that I wrote down. Anything else I want to add to this video? Since we're just exploring the idea of implants, and if you as a gate kid might have one, are they a real thing? Is this purely speculation? Just the fact that there's all this interesting information out there that you can find yourself on US patent websites. And again, there's no verifiable proof that this has been used. But it's interesting that it exists, and it's interesting all the movies we've seen about it, and how Hollywood has a conscience where they have to tell you what they're going to do to you because it relieves them of the karma if they're telling you, okay? But they have to tell you through art and film and movies because they can't directly tell you. Come on, they're smarter than that. They've got to do it through movies. And then they've got to convince you that it's just a movie. You're crazy. You're talking about this technology. You saw that in a movie. You have an overactive imagination. Even though the government's been hiding aliens coming to Earth in the 1940s, and then for some reason all these secret military projects start around then, and all this stuff is happening, and then of course the Greys have a vested interest in what happens on Earth because they won't exist if we don't choose that timeline. And then the Mayan calendar, I'd like to think that they were a nice advanced civilization that interacted with the sky gods, or the Anunnaki, which might have been the Anunnaki who created the human slave race to mine gold for their ships. All this Bible prophecy stuff happening, Book of Enoch, like all these things connected. A lot of people, like, are there angels and demons, or are the angels and demons aliens in different alien races? I don't know, but my mind is about to blow. And there's been so much that we've uncovered this week on my channel. The DARE program was interesting because that is not an experiment per se, but that was a multi-million dollar organization. They were putting a lot of money into the DARE program for a program that didn't work, and they went through an awful lot of trouble to make sure that the public didn't know that it didn't work. There's a pretty vested interest in beings of higher authority to keep people in certain states of consciousness so their consciousness can be manipulated or directed to other agendas. So if you haven't watched my other videos, there's some that are pretty relevant here that go into this research even further. We'll even cover the Stargates and all that stuff in my last video about portals. My video about portals, the last one before this, covers everything that's happened since then in more detail. The gateway tapes video, the don't use the gateway tapes video, all the information I found about the gateway tapes from the CIA's own website themselves. You'll find out more factual information in that video. That's the precursor to what I've shared in this video. And then of course, have a bunch of other videos on my channel talking about MK Ultra, talking about the whistleblower article, talking about Hollywood programming and the Hollywood agenda. And I made a couple of playlists for your viewing enjoyment. So you can binge my videos with me if you want, but don't worry, I'm never going to leave you in a negative space, because I believe in sovereignty. I believe in personal choice and personal will. And I think that conspiracies are a trap. And I think that if we stay here too long, it's bad for our consciousness and it's bad for the world. And it's important to, when we go down the rabbit hole, to find a way out of the rabbit hole. So some of the things I offer, if you don't feel like you're in a space where you can just leave the conspiracy stuff behind without feeling overly invested in it, or like not being able to sleep at night because there's a bunch of scary stuff happening, how can you claim your sovereignty? How can you be a person who's immune to mind control? I mean, can we really be immune to mind control if we have implants in us? I don't know. Am I being mind controlled right now? Are you using me like a puppet against my will? I don't know, guys. I really don't know. And if I think too hard about it, like, my mind might explode. So trying to be all lighthearted about it, hence my fun studio here, okay? Don't take myself too seriously, and I don't take these things too seriously, other than they're fun to explore, they're fun to talk about, they're fun to think about, but make sure we don't stay there, we don't stay in fear, and we realize that's all it is. It's just something to explore, something to think about, but to not over-identify with and not over-attach ourselves with. And that's why I provide tools and services like astrology readings, like human design readings, like remote viewing tarot readings, or one-on-one sessions working with people where you can ask the cards, or me specifically, questions that you have that you're struggling with. That's why I also talk about sobriety on my channel, because sobriety and meditation are the most important things you can do for yourself to control your mind and start realizing like what is yours, what is the guidance that you are receiving from your higher self, from spirit, from the internal part of you that is higher guidance. That's also why I made a video about trust your gut versus how do you trust your gut versus your trauma. Trust your gut, not your trauma, okay? So I made that video too, because sometimes it can be hard to distinguish between our own intuition and these things that have been potentially beamed at us through microwaves and antennas and 5G cell phone towers and RFID technology, and I don't know, God knows what else. So hopefully this video did not leave you in fear. Hopefully it leaves you in an empowered state, because now you have access to this information. And now if you feel so inclined, you can go do your own research and see for yourself how they're telling us what's going on. Now you can make informed decisions, like whether or not you're going to watch specific television, whether or not you're going to continue drinking the Kool-Aid or the whiskey and vodka or the dispensary trips and all these other things that you've been programmed to do because it's normal, or because you attended school and they really cemented the ideas that they talked about in the DARE program. They told you not to do it, but if I tell you not to eat a cookie, what do you think of? You think of a cookie, and now you want to go get that cookie, if you're anything like me anyways. So I'm just saying, it's kind of like a reverse psychology thing, and they did it on millions of children, and now look at us, we have a DRUG epidemic, and yeah, people are just falling off left and right, and it's nothing to laugh about, because these are brilliant people that we've lost to addiction, and it's really, really sad, and it's a real thing that's happening. So I'm not trying to make light of that. I'm just trying to leave people better than I found them. I'm trying to share my tips for how I stay aligned and vibrating high despite all of this. And I do believe that there's potential to stop the apocalyptic timeline, and I think we're already on that path. I think there's enough of us that are waking up, and I think every time a new person wakes up, you activate more and more people. And I've talked about it before, when you're vibrating from your heart chakra, when you are living and vibrating in those higher frequencies, your energy is expansive, versus when you feel fear, you contract. So imagine hundreds of thousands of people, even 100 people with like huge auras, walking around and, you know, putting their heart energy out there into the vacuum of the universe, dark matter. And then you've got all these people in fear who are like scared. They're going to need those people who are in fear in massive numbers for their plan to work. We don't need as many people awakened, but every time you do awake, just think of a still pool of water. It's flat, but you make one little tiny vibration, that pool starts to go crazy, and it's moving outwards, and you're affecting so many people. So stay woke. And if you got something to share that's not going to leave people in fear, but that's just going to empower them with knowledge, then share what you're passionate about, do what lights you up, do what makes you happy, and be part of the change that we need to see so we don't turn into gray aliens. Okay, thanks. That's all for today. I'll see you guys in the next video.